Hello, I feel a bit short. Oh well, that's okay. There you go. But I'm not going to sing. So I'm going to talk to you about when psychology meets biology, because I'm a bit of a weird mongrel in what I do. I originally trained in psychology and then decided it'd be a great idea to do a master's and PhD in molecular biology with zero training. That's fun. So what I'm going to talk to you today... Oh, my slide's not working. We're just going to roll with it. I'm going to talk to you today about what it is that makes you, you. And a big part of that is about our bodies, our genetics, our environment, and our experience. You know that you get some of your genes from your father, half of your genes approximately from your mother, and that contributes to you, but also your parents are the ones raising you. I'm going to take you on a whistle-stop tour of my lab, and all of my formatting has gone wrong, but I'm going to roll with that too. A whistle-stop tour on my lab and life's journey, and what we're covering on the molecular side of our research. Now, at the beginning of your life, you inherit these genes from your mother and your father. I've got a question for you guys. How many people here have been touched by mental health? Not personally, like also with other people. I know otherwise that's a very confronting question. Apologies. Stress. How many people have experienced serious, significant stress? These are all really central tenets of the research that I do. So you know you inherit genes from your mother, you inherit genes from your father. But what does that actually mean for what happens to you in your life and your behavior and your mental health outcomes? Well, it might surprise you to know that almost all behavior has a genetic basis. Now, I get some nods and then I get some looks of horror about that. But there's a lot of evidence for that. I can tell you another time how we figured that out. Now, in our lab, a lot of the work we do is looking at molecular genetics. We've identified multiple genes that increase the risk for particular disorders altogether. And what we've recently found, for example, is that genetics that increases the risk of anorexia nervosa, that's a really debilitating clinical condition, eating disorder. It also actually increases the risk in the general population. So a room like this for just disordered eating, well, not normal disordered eating, but the normal continuum of eating patterns. So why is this important? Because if we find ways to identify people early who may require intervention, we may be able to help people sooner. And we know early intervention is key in these conditions. So does that mean, if I tell you that everything has a genetic basis, do you now feel, oh my God, it's inevitable. I have no control over my life. Does anybody, not necessarily that extreme, but does anybody feel a little bit like, hold up, now it's inevitable? No, I've got nothing to convince you of. One person, thank you, I'm running with you. Excellent. Well, the good news is it's not necessarily inevitable because we're not just made of our genes, but our environment is a really central part of our lives as well, which we also have with our families and outside. And the other bit of my research is looking at understanding how it is that the environment may influence our genetics to develop particular conditions, right? Now, I don't know if any of you have heard about epigenetics. So epigenetics is probably the thing that monopolizes a lot of our research. And the way I like to explain epigenetics, because people have a relatively good grasp of genetics, is that there's a piece of music there, right? Those musical notes, that's your DNA code. That's written down. That's what it is. It's for the period of time that it is. But you see those annotations, those scribbles on top? That influences how that music is expressed, and that's your epigenetics. So epigenetics influences your gene expression, musical expression, without changing that DNA code. So we're looking at how epigenetics may influence your DNA code to alter the outcomes down the track. Some of the work that we've done, for example, we've found that socioeconomic status, which some of you may be familiar with, may not be familiar with. We've found that a low socioeconomic status, so people who are struggling more financially with familial support and that sort of thing, that there are epigenetic changes on their genome in stress-related genes and genes important in molecular aging and biological aging. What's more is that we've found that those same genes may explain some of the relationship we know exists with these adverse conditions with mental health outcomes, specifically depressive symptoms. This is unpublished, guys, don't tell anyone. But it's all very interesting. But the big point of this is that it's not just your genetics. Without a stressful environment, it might be that your genetics doesn't actually precipitate in an eating disorder or a depression episode or otherwise, okay? Now, on our life journey, my life journey's disappeared because who needs formatting? It was also orange, and now we're blue. But that's okay. It's okay. On our life journey, we're coming back to the baby now. I wonder who I'm going to surprise with this. Did you know that your life exposures can influence your children? Did you know your life exposures can or are correlated with outcomes of your children to do with life exposures before you conceived them? So there is a lot of evidence of preconception stress being associated with poor outcomes in the children. So this is stress before you've made the baby, and the children have worse physical and mental health outcomes. So initially, when I heard that, I was a bit like, meh, whatever, because, you know, parents raise the children, maybe they've had trauma, they raise them differently. But no, it's been to the level of when babies are born earlier, and they're born with lower birth weights. So it's very clear that there's something perhaps more or less psychological, if you like, going on. And I hate to say that because everything psychological is biological, if you're me. But anyway, so that brings us to our latest piece of research, which has got to do with, if this works, looking at, so while this is an emerging part of research, oh, there we go, they've come. A bit slow to the party, we won't talk about that. So the latest bit of research that we're doing is trying to understand if that intergenerational inheritance of stress is passed by germline through the sperm, if it's possible to pass it to the next generation. This is all very new. I can't tell you any answers yet, because we are still doing the research. We got the data this week, and my clicker is still not working. Oh! So what I want to quickly wrap up with is we've shown you about DNA, explained to you how DNA can contribute to your behavior, but hopefully I've explained how the environment can also modify that risk. And in turn, we're now exploring this idea of intergenerational epigenetic inheritance and if it's really actually a thing. I'll hopefully be able to tell you next time about it. And I'm trying again. What am I pointing it at? Well, there you go, scientist. So my question to you about life's journey is if knowing this information, if this might change anything about what you do and what you engage in. If you know that you've got a genetic risk for something, say cardiovascular disease, to make it very simple with a very clear intervention, are you now more likely to go for a run knowing that can affect that genetic risk? And the reason I ask you that is because whirlwind tour number 2 might be psychoeducation, something else that we're working on. Thank you.